Welcome back. Thanks for coming. Last week we had a slow, easy look at Tensho. Tensho really has some very beautiful gifts if you practice it often enough so that it becomes intuitive and, if you like, cellular, for want of a better term. If you look at it in terms of yin and yang, the Tensho is the soft, circular version, and the Sunshin is the hard, strong version. And the two together make a really nice balance. My daily training at the minimum is one Sunshin and one Tensho. Some days that's all I get around to doing. I think they really go well together. And last week we looked at Tensho. This week we're going to have a little look at Sanchin. Incorrect movement, if it's done incorrectly, you see a lot of guys over the years in Kyokushin, and they come away with a lot of injury. And I hate to say it, but quite often it's because of just slightly incorrect angles when they're doing something, or separation from body parts when they're doing something. So I think, first of all, one of the things that it offers is what I call connection. It teaches you a very deep lesson in two of the movements, the same movement done twice in the kata. Very, very valuable to teach you a lesson, connection. Leverage is using more and more of your body against less and less of his. So how can a 60 kilogram person beat a 100 kilogram person? Well, it's leverage. The 60 kilogram person uses more and more of his strength and body against less and less. So you isolate the big man's weaknesses and you leverage your own strengths so that the 60 kilogram man now feels like 100 kilograms and the 100 kilogram man now feels like 60 kilograms. And it can happen. And if you weigh 100 Ks and you've ever grappled with someone, or if you've ever sparred with someone smaller than you who leverages their own skills, particularly in stand-up, it can be speed. And there's one particular movement done twice in the kata that really, really demonstrates that very clearly. So I'm just going to do the kata briefly. Urs Frederick, good to see you. That was a great couple of photos you sent. Frederick sent a couple of really nice pics with the great Maria Cook, Kick and Cook. I have very interesting memories of at Hombu. She probably wouldn't remember me, but I certainly remember her. She was pretty awesome.
Was she the one, Shihan, that you said got females training at Hombu, changed Sosai's mind a bit?
Yeah. He said, I train with women. So the next day she knocks all the women out, and one of them sprints upstairs and says, Sosai, we've got a bit of a problem. She's knocked us all out. So he said, okay, you can train with the men now. Yeah, she was pretty awesome. Everyone, Matus, Gary, Roland, nice to see you, man. How you been? Good. All the way from Dallas to us. Let's have a quick look at the Sunshin kata. Now, there's another really important point. I tend to believe that very strong ibuki and done with very high levels of tension, I believe can affect blood pressure. And so there's something I notice over time, and I could be completely wrong. I haven't done any statistical research, but just an anecdotal observation is I notice a lot of the Okinawan masters, as they get a lot older, they tend to soften things a bit. And if they don't, I don't know that it's healthy for the blood pressure. I think that's a very important consideration, is as you get older, your body is not capable of withstanding a lot of the pressures you create in training compared to when you're young. So I think as you get older, you need to soften up a little bit. That's just my segue into doing a nice soft Sunshin. Okay, so let's have a quick look at Sunshin. Sunshin. Good. So there's a slow, easy look through the version of Sunshin that I do. We've spoken about it before with Sensei. He's just turned up. There's Sensei Mike. And how in some streams of karate, and not just some styles, because in some styles, even within some styles, there are multiple variations of it. And I'm sure in Kyokushin, you'll even see that now since Sosai passed away. There's been a slight spread in the way they do kata. But even in, and Sensei Mike can probably confirm, even in Goju, there are so many different avenues of Goju, and I'm sure some of them do the kata different. And from what I observe, sometimes there's a turn and sometimes there's not. It's not that important other than the lesson that this turn teaches. And this is the area that I wanted to particularly focus on. There's a couple of things I wanted to look at. Firstly, in the performance of the kata, it's very important that the technique, when you come out, watch my hand. This sort of movement. Where you lose the tension and pick up the speed, it happens without people being fully conscious of it. It's only when it's pointed out to people that they develop and learn. Keep the tension all the way. All the way. It's not maybe the way you do it is, I'm not saying, but the way that's also taught, it wasn't. And you may be doing it without even being aware. Is very important. The other thing is the grip itself. As I get older, my fingers get more arthritic, and my hands are pretty well considering the amount of arthritis in my family. But it's really important that this little finger business be dealt with. You see a lot of guys get and their little fingers out like this. Okay, Sosai said that you squeeze the little finger, close with the thumb, and close your hand, but the body weight is, whilst you strike with the seiken, the body weight is focused. So your mental picture is the body weight is focused between the little finger and the ring finger, like that. So when you do the kata now, that's where you're focusing your concentration. And by doing that, you tighten the little finger. So this problem of squeezing, letting the little finger float, it tends to disappear naturally. Okay, now the turn, the idea of the turn here. And let me illustrate what I mean by connection and leverage. Okay, they're very intimately connected. Leverage is using more and more of my body against less and less of his. The optimal way to increase leverage is connection. I want to connect not only more and more of my body with itself, but also more and more of my body against more of his body. So, for example, I've used this example before. I think I did it last week even. If I have one hand on, or Mitch has one hand on me, escaping that should be as simple as anything. If he has two hands, now I've got to change my kick, and it takes a lot more strength. Okay? If he gets two hands and his body on, now he has one hand, two hand, plus connection. This from my shoulder to my forearm is connected to his body. Now the chances of me getting out of that have gone from one-on-one wrist to 100% to two-on-one plus full connection to pretty well 100% the other side. Unless I can somehow break that connection. Now, the way I'm going to break that connection is create space. Space becomes my friend. So what I might do is push his head. Now, see when I push his head? It starts to create space and he loses the connection. So a lot of time people think I've got to try and get that arm out. Really what you need to do is create space where the connection was. That's very important. The other thing now is when I have this turn, when I turn in the kata, from that side perspective, one, here, two, one, two, okay? If Mitch was to grab my arm, okay, if I try to pull Mitch like that, there's zero chance because he's strong and he's solid. Okay, and that's the same as in the kata doing this. Watch this hand. A lot of people go, and they lift their hand off the body, and they do. And if you were to look at a photo series in a book of kata, that's the first position, that's the second position, so it doesn't matter, you wouldn't know. But remember that the whole key to movement is what happens between this position and this position. Okay, so it's very important. If I use the illustration of Mitch grabbing me, maybe two hands, and I pull with just my arm, there's very little chance of me moving it. So now I have to increase leverage and connection. So just let go for a second. When I do it in the kata now, watch what I do. My hand stays basically where it is on my body. See that? Hasn't moved yet. I don't keep my body there and move my hand alone. I keep my hand there, move my body. See that? So I've already gone from this position to this position here to there without even moving my hand in relation to my own body. So now I have leverage and connection. So now when Mitch grabs me, I put my hand on my body. Now instead of trying to move my arm, I move my whole body, and it's very hard for Mitch to stop it. Yeah. And I can attest that he was doing it just as hard. Okay, so the hand by itself is very hard. The hand on the body, and I move my body, is very...
Either I let go or I can move.
Yes. Okay, so and this finds a lot of application in a lot of situations, especially when you're grappling. One of the most important principles you can ever have is a knee and elbow connection to create this wall. In my core 54, I have 8 fundamental shapes, defensive shapes against 8 fundamental kicks. We have it in rehearsals, and he didn't even tell Mitch we're doing it. But if Mitch does a back kick, a right back kick, into my body, what I need is the connection of my elbow to my hip. If I don't connect, boom, he'll find the gap. If it's 1 inch, he'll find the gap. So what I need to do is I'm going to roll my hip upwards and catch it there. So now when he throws it, I pick it up like that. And what gives me the strength to do that is that connection of my elbow to my hip. That's in the stand-up situation. There like that. If I was to do exactly the same thing, but block it without connecting, you can guarantee he'll find it. There. But now I have connection. Okay? So there's that. Also on the ground, we're not going to do any ground work today, but on the ground, the applications you find for that connection are just limitless, really.
There's one, Shihan, that you just did then when you're talking about moving the body versus moving the hand. It's the same on the ground. I've forgotten the exact position, but you do one where we're underhooked from the bottom and we can't move our arm, so we just move our body to the arm.
Yeah.
And that's that same principle you're talking about, exactly the same principle here as on the ground.
Okay, so what Mitch is referring to is this situation where I want to take his arm for an arm hook there, see that? But Mitch's arm is really strong, okay? And I can't pull that arm in. So what I do is I'll move his body to the arm. Same principle. Sometimes you can't move your arm, so you move your body to your arm. I'm underneath him down here, okay? And he starts to take my arm up like that. You see this? If he gets my arm above my elbow, if he gets my elbow above my head, I'm in big, big trouble. Okay? Now, I try and bring my elbow back. I can't do it. So what I do is I attach my hand to his lap and I move my body in, and it
Nullifies my arm.
neutralizes the one-on-one, arm on arm. Now again, don't let me. So it's exactly the same principle. I'm leveraging my body by using more and more of my body against less and less of Mitch's. So I think when you experiment with the kata, and particularly you experiment with this feeling of the arm being on the body rather than the arm moving separately to the body. The only time you do that is when you don't pressure test against someone who's strong. As soon as you pressure test against someone who's strong, you realize that this doesn't work anymore. You need to literally connect your arm to the body there like that. And it almost becomes impossible to stop. It becomes so powerful simply because you're leveraging more and more of your body.
And Shihan, that position here where you talk about the arm coming away from the body, that opens a waki, which opens you to kimuras and double wrist lock and so on.
Yes.
If someone's skilled in that, will just eat you for breakfast, basically.
Yeah, I mean, any wrestler will tell you that the first thing you protect is the underhook. The underhook is death. If they know how to get an underhook under here like that way, and you don't know how to deal with it, well, then you're in big trouble, okay? But by keeping the elbows, the waki close, Sosai emphasized all the time. He said it over and over, waki oshimete, close the armpit, close the waki. And also he said that there's two reasons. One, prevent the underhook in the later ranges, but also as soon as you elevate the elbow, you have excessive tension in the shoulder. So it means if your elbows are up, you can't relax. And if you've ever watched boxers, their warm-ups are just like nice and nice and easy. Okay, as soon as there's tension in your shoulder, you're like this, okay? And Sosai said that 90%, that's exactly what he said, 90% of all karate problems, including kick problems, including movement problems, can be found to be as a result of excessive tension in the shoulder, like that. As soon as you learn to relax the shoulders, let the waki close naturally and let the hands come in, a lot changes. And Sanchin teaches that, even though it's a kata where you have high levels of tension, it's the balance, the points of power stress and the times for the places where it's tense and the places where it's relaxed. And this is the beauty of that. And when you look at the Sensei Mike mentioned, when you look at uechi-ryu, this sort of movement, they're even, it's still Sanchin. This movement where it's out here with the hands. And this is very common, even like you look at Tong Long. Tong Long tend to have this, they do the box out and the gao choi, and everything is from this inner movement here. Armpits nice and closed. So it's a very strong principle. And you can see when Sosai says that Shin Gi Tai, Shin, the mind, the breathing, the spiritual side comes from India. Gi, the technique side, comes from China. Tai, the physical training side, comes from Japan. The Japanese style of training, physical conditioning, is unique to Japan. Whereas the techniques that a lot of these styles use comes from China. Okay, and that closing your armpits there is very important. And in grappling, they call it T-Rex arms. So you never let your arms off. And many years ago, in about 94, 95, a fantastic BJJ leader in Australia named Pete DeBean. Shout out to Pete DeBean from DeBean BJJ. He was Carlos Gracie Jr.'s first Australian black belt. And he told me something. He wrote it for me. He said, if you araldite your elbows to your body, you move 90% of all your problems in BJJ. Isn't that interesting? He said that, and also I said excessive tension in the shoulder is the cause of 90% of the problems in karate. Pete DeBean says if you araldite your elbows to the body, there goes 90% of your problems.
And then, Shane, you talk about the Tong Long, this position, and you watch wrestlers engage, they're in that position.
That's it.
They're exactly there as well. So it's so interesting.
It is indeed. So anyway, there you have it. There's a brief look at some principles of Sunshin. I think it's very, very important that you understand the fundamentals of that. Remember, first of all, don't pop the arm at the end. The arm continues slowly, maintains that pace all the way through. When you do the turn, the arm connects to the body. I used to describe it as wiping mud off your arm. It's like you're wiping this mud. Wipe the mud off your arm like that. I think that's very important.
Question, Shihan.
Yes, sir.
The stance in Sanchin, so doing Sanchin as you get older and go through life, how knees or ankles or hips to continue to develop Sanchin throughout life?
Well, I think one thing really, really valuable is that as you get older, the long stances become more difficult. A lot of stress on the hips, stress on the knees, and it's not just karate guys. I think if you speak to sportsmen from any sport, they'll walk around hobbling with knees. A guy got on the plane the other day, and I said, "Boy, you look like an old rugby player." And he said, "You picked that and won." And it was nothing to do with his cauliflower ears and everything to do with his sore knees and hips.
Gait, yeah.
So every seriously strong impact sports or heavy sport it taxes the knees and the hips. There's no doubt about it, and the ankles. In karate, the long stances, even kibadachi, less so shikodachi, because the feet angle out, so there's less pressure on the knees. Zenkutsu-dachi, it's okay, it's easy to get into Zenkutsu, but as you get old, it's more difficult to move through Zenkutsu. So stances like Sunshin become vital, and in fact, I think for the older generation, people over a certain age, and I don't stick to an age because it may be 50, it may be 60, it may be 45. It depends on the degree of your own injury. But for people who have compromised hips, knees, and ankles, Sanchin is the bomb. You can experiment with doing all your kata in Sanchin and even a shallow Kokutsu. So, for example, you may, do Hai Kyokushin, okay, instead of going here like this with a nice strong Zenkutsu, and then you have trouble because if you have no right knee, you have trouble, so you've got to do all this sort of stuff and the technique is lost. But if you do it in Sanchin, there, then you can do it from there. You can do 100% power in the upper body technique simply because by using Sanchin stance, you don't compromise your hips, knees, and ankles. Of course. Thanks, guys. Appreciate you coming along. Sensei Mike, thanks for your input. As always, it's always educational. If you don't know Sensei Mike Clark, they're the author of the book Shingi Tai and a number of other books. And he's a very high-ranking Shihan in Goju Karate. Thanks, everyone. Boss, Frederick, thanks for those photos you sent too. Fantastic. See you next week. Hope you got something out of that. Remember, Sanchin, the yang, Tensho, the yin, make up the perfect balance of the two. Boss. Thanks, Mitch. Boss. See you next week. Boss.